Okay, good evening and welcome to this Insight supported by Rolex. I'm Sophie Redfern and tonight we'll go behind the scenes of the opera Last Days, which is back on stage here in the Limbury Theatre. Adapted from Gus Van Sant's 2005 film, opera by Oliver Leith and Matt Copson portrays the final days of a successful musician, Blake, loosely based on Kurt Cobain. In Last Days, Blake returns home after escaping rehab, only to be haunted by objects, visitors and memories distracting him from his true purpose, self-destruction. Starring Jake Dunn and featuring an original aria recorded by singer-songwriter Caroline Polachek, the opera captures the slow unravelling of a man tormented by outside noise and inside turmoil. This evening, we are going to be hearing from the team who have worked to bring Last Days back to the stage here in Covent Garden. But first, to tell us all about the creation of the opera, I am joined by composer Oliver Leith and librettist and co-director Matt Copson. So welcome both and thank you very much for joining me here. So Last Days premiered here in 2022 and it returned to the Limbury Theatre last Friday. So I've got to start by asking, how does it feel to be back? Oliver, do you want to start?
It feels great. It's been a long journey. This piece has been elsewhere as well, but it's so nice to bring it back into a building that we thought about for the production as well. Incredible team in the theatre, like, from everything lights to sound, and it's been great. I'm not saying this show was loose before, but like we tightened certain things, and it feels in a better place, or at least a more interesting place, yeah.
Interesting. Matt, for you?
Yeah, it's great. It's nice to be able to revisit something, because when you're first making it, you are really in a bubble, and you're thinking about kind of fundamentals. Does this work? Does this communicate? And when you know that certain things do work, you can kind of focus yourself in on details that you maybe skim over when thinking about the broader picture first time around. So it feels nice to have that opportunity to do it.
Indeed. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the journey that the opera has been on that you've hinted at there later this evening. But I'd really like to start by looking back at the initial creation, taking you back in time a little bit here. So Oliver, you became composer in residence at the Royal Opera House in 2019, I believe, as part of a talent development partnership between the Opera House and the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. Can you tell a little bit about that experience and creatively and professionally what that meant to you?
Yes, I'm not sure that sort of wonderful project and opportunity exists anymore, and I hope that isn't my fault and just really just the world's fault rather than mine. But just to give you a bit of background, it was a thing that ran between the Guildhall and the Royal Opera House to sort of incubate operas, and with the end goal they would be on in the Limbury. I had that opportunity and then sort of was at a loss with what I'd actually do with it, because previously I'd done sort of smaller operatic things and I'd been paired up with people, so actually the first step was finding someone that I wanted to work with, and that's, yeah, I can talk more about that in a bit, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, so you've hinted at there that there's basically, at the end of that, there is a big project. That partnership, there was an opportunity in this theatre, which is really thrilling, actually, as a young composer, I presume. Yeah. Staged by the Royal Opera House, you know. It's
a crazy opportunity. Yeah, I was extremely grateful to be part of it.
And for you, that was Last Days. So that this is, you know, and so it was adapted then from the film, loosely based on the final days of Kurt Cobain. But so your starting point then, I'm intrigued whether it was a case of you had an opera in mind and a sort of idea of an opera, or whether actually it was the film that you went, I want to work on that. How were you thinking about the project at that point?
I think more interestingly, actually, the real starting point was the person. So I had, who I was going to work with, and Matt and I met at your choice. I would have preferred a pub, but you picked a tea place in Soho.
Yeah.
Very on brand. But we met and we just discussed shared interests. Well, shared interests sounds so sort of scouts or something, or French GCSE or something. But but we were talking about mundanity and magic. I mean, Matt should talk about this as well, because this was just as much Matt's thing. But basically, we talked about Last Days almost as a reference point, as part of this idea of mundanity and everydayness, and slightly heightened, but yeah.
We were trying to find where our individual kind of worlds lay. I'm an artist, and Ollie was really interested in the banal, which I found interesting, and I've always kind of had an interest in kind of the magic or the magic realist. And we were thinking about where these two things came together. And Last Days was a reference point, specifically the point where in the film he just pours some cereal. Like, the film doesn't really have a narrative. It's sort of a man wanders around a house, then kills himself. And we're talking about Beauty and the Beast as well, the various iterations of Beauty and the Beast, where you have kind of cutlery that comes alive. And I think after a certain point we were thinking, well, why not Last Days as well? Because opera itself as a form, which we were kind of starting to think that's what this would be, deals with tragedy. It deals often mythology, and it was kind of interesting to place mundanity into that world as well. And so it kind of formed out of that. Plus, there was somewhere to take it as well. I find it very odd when people try and adapt things that were made as resolute masterpieces, like, here's my play of Moby Dick, good luck. And The Last Days kind of offers itself up in lots of ways, because the world has changed a lot since when Kurt Cobain died in 2005, when Gus made that film, and now we're in another kind of cultural moment, which I think it still resonates in.
I think it's worth saying, actually, Matt, that you are an artist, director, and you work across sculpture, installation, and theatre. So actually, all of these different mediums are very much sort of part of your day-to-day and what you're thinking about. And so in terms of, you came together to sort of talk projects, but were you existing friends? I mean, how did that start? How do you find someone who you on the same wavelength with? How did that come? How did you find each other? Is basically,
a dating app. Yeah.
Basically, a dating app of our friend.
Yeah.
Called Dan Harl. I actually just said, do you know anyone who's basically interested in theatre who makes good-looking stuff? that was basically it. Yeah.
So there's a visual element.
Yeah, I mean, because there are some things about opera whereby they're not to my taste and things like that, or productions, and it was important to have sort of a thing in place which is like, I know that it would always look a certain way. And we talked about that straight away when we were writing it, is it looking a certain way was just as important as what the notes would be and what the libretto might end up being, and direction as well.
So you've hinted there actually about your thoughts about the history. I mean, you're writing an opera. There's a lot of history of opera that comes with this, and as a musician, we're all aware of that when we come to this kind of thing. So it's sort of, you've kind of done bits of music theatre before. You're a newcomer to opera, Matt. So where does that inspiration then? Was it more for you of going, I know what I don't want it to be, rather than what you do, or how were you thinking about opera? I guess is my question.
We weren't.
We weren't, is probably the main thing. Well, I mean, no, I was aware of some things I wanted to avoid, which is sort of, I mean, I can't say this isn't melodramatic. It is about a suicide, obviously. But within this, actually, that's the importance of that is actually that it frames all of these everyday things as like the last time you might do them. So actually everything is given weight. That's the sort of important framework of that. I feel like I was going to say something else there, but then
I think the thing that I knew about opera, heard of it, but I was certainly not my world. I wasn't interested in most of it because most of it is stuffy and traditional and doesn't want to move dialogue forward, which is what I'm more interested in contemporary art. But of course there were these reference points of things like Einstein on the beach, whatever, I love them. But I was really trying to think like, well, what is an opera? Like, how would it be a relevant form in 2025, and I think we both have the same answer, which is that, well, of course it's a relevant contemporary thing because it's about the bringing together of all of the forms. It's a compromised medium in an interesting way. It puts theatre, it puts music, it puts staging, it puts all of these things together. And so if it's going to do that, then there should be zero hierarchy. Those things should bleed into one another as much as possible for it to be very, very interesting. And that really, really appealed to me. And it really, really appealed to me working with Ollie, who's interested in sounds beyond the orchestra, like the the bottles rattling that you hear happening, the kind of textural elements of the telephone on the stage or something, those could be as musical as the timpani or whatever. And so that's how we really approached making this together, because I didn't really know what I was doing as well, like an unconventional manner of, I would write something, send it to Ollie, Ollie would send me some music, send it back, and we just sent each other stuff back and forth and drew out a graph being like, well, I think it should get chaotic here. I think it should just plunge into darkness here, etc.
Do you think of dramatic narrative though, so that actually within that, I mean, we're going to talk about it not being linear, but actually that is something that was sketched out in your mind of like, actually, where are we going? What are our points? And, you know, that kind of way of mapping out, despite it kind of rejecting a certain amount of narrative storytelling.
Completely together. I mean, there was some like stupid things that I discovered in my studio that I would ask to be put in the piece, like a kettle that I got to sing in tune, which is up there. We're not going to do it today, but it does. It sings in tune and all that. So then, so it's so intermeshed with like what we both wanted to do at the same time and what it would look like and how that would fit into the sort of narrative, I say in a loose way.
Yeah. Can I ask you then, I mean, a lot of these points you're touching on, so did you feel quite early on that there was a shared aesthetic, really? You've got kind of themes that you were both interested in, but in terms of this aesthetic, or was it a case of you kind of both feeding off each other in terms of that?
I think it's...
I don't believe in aesthetic. I think
it has a very clear aesthetic.
I think I believe in aesthetics, like lots of them. And so whilst I think certain things wanted to work in parallel to one another, something might look the way it sounds, I think at other points we wanted there to be some level of dissonance to those things.
It's very pluralistic and all those things, but they're all at counterpoint. And things take different, I guess, foregrounds and backgrounds throughout the whole thing.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about that adaptation process actually in working from film, because it's quite distinctive that, you know, your source material is very visually and sonically rich. Actually, in terms of sort of text, if you like, dialogue is pretty spare. So how did you approach, Matt, developing the libretto from that? And were there elements that you really wanted to preserve, to transform or leave behind when you started thinking about this?
I mean, I think I watched the film twice and then just tried to forget about it. I'd seen it once maybe even once, like I saw it as a teenager when I saw like Elephant and Jerry, and it had a big impact on me then. So it kind of always stuck around in my mind. So I kind of was thinking about how it felt more than the specific mechanics of it, because it belongs to a kind of tradition of like anti-narrative slow cinema. And I realized that the demands on stage are totally different, but they had this central idea of a character that doesn't want to be on stage. So in a sense, there was this kind of farcical or like Beckett-y absurd thing of like, he literally doesn't want to be here, and here is the world, is the stage. And so I kind of sketched out this idea that there would be this house that would be on these stilts with this backdrop here, and there would be all these entrances and exits from these characters, some of which retain DNA from the film. There was the Mormons that come along because they seemed fun, and some of which didn't. And then this essential idea of, then there's nothing at the end. And like, how long can you have nothingness for on a stage where it's just music and light? So you kind of lead towards this point of abstraction. But I thought about these characters as all being different sort of archetypes. And we spoke about that a lot with the music. Like the DHL delivery driver is kind of like a walking kind of jingle.
Yeah, an advertisement.
Yeah, so it was taking bits from it, but it was really trying to think about what all of that meant in the present day, and for a person who wants to die, but they want, more importantly, to kind of destroy the symbol that they've created. And thinking about how, you know, when Gus made this film in 2005, he's kind of from this real like Gen X, like don't sell out culture that relates to what the original source of Kurt Cobain was about. And now it kind of felt like, there's a wider thing that's happened, which is that we're just, every gesture of rebellion is assimilated. And so I was kind of interested in bringing this further into the version of it on stage and the writing.
So actually, it felt very distant then, the film, once you were in the project, and it really was just
Yeah.
a very much a catalyst at that point. And can I just say, Oliver, was that the same for you? Because the thing that's quite striking about the film is its sound, right? And in terms of music, it starts with some Renaissance polyphony.
Yeah,
It does. So you open the film, if you've not seen it, the very start of the film has this kind of Renaissance polyphony that then doesn't come back. But then we enter this kind of very curious world. So I was wondering, you're aware of that, obviously. So does that feed into anything at all, or is this completely, put aside for you?
Well, it didn't have music. So that's helpful, yeah, apart from the beautiful Giuseppe. There is one sound element in the thing which is very interesting, because it's, I guess, in some way similar to what we did with this, which is where it sort of raises the stakes of just real sound. It's treated in a very different way. For those of you who haven't seen the film, the film is sort of mic'd up to be about like 10 times louder than everything would be. So footsteps and everything are a lot louder. It's a really strange, sound palette for a film. Particularly as there's very little dialogue, so just everything else turn up. It's almost like you're watching the film too loud in a way, and that's the only similarity really.
I guess one thing we had actually from it, like a really early idea was, wouldn't it be great to do an opera where the lead role wasn't a singer,
That's the main
and was basically just mumbled their way, and that kind of said some words up above and played to that idea, and it was almost like they woke up one day and we acknowledged the weirdness of the singing by saying, like, why the fuck are you singing? Like, why are you singing DHL to me? Why are you doing all of this? Because they're that level of alienated from the world. And so that was kind of a key idea, which I guess there's some genesis of in the film.
Yeah, so there's a playfulness there about then a real conscious awareness of what you're doing in opera, by that, understanding, the oddity of opera there. You're sort of leading into it, and they're heightening it by the choice of Blake being silent, being, like you say, mumbling, not singing. Do you see, I was wondering whether you saw your opera as part of a lineage of sort of other film operas based on films. I mean, we've, a previous season, we had Feston, Mark Anthony Turnage, Lee Hall's version of Feston based on Winterberg. There's multiple operas done on Lars von Trier films. I was thinking about The Exterminating Angel and stuff like that. Do you see it as similarities? Is there something about cinema that's, feeding in, or do you see yours as just, it was this project, this was the right source material, and then off we went?
I think it was just the idea in the film. Film to opera adaptation, whatever, that's fine. But I think it was really it's the premise of the film is the more important thing, and this idea of isolation and how we could push that more in opera. In
terms of source material. And one thing that struck me a little bit about what you've been talking about is that, I mean, Oliver, you've mentioned there about you wanted someone who there's a look. So you actually you start thinking with the visual from the start, So does that play in then? It sounds like it's very core part of your collaboration, really, of the visual, leaning in then to what you're doing musically?
Yeah, yes. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't control what everything will look like, and the most wonderful discovery of this whole piece is actually the final lighting stages, which we didn't really discuss that much. That was a nice surprise, because I don't have that much imagination. But I think it sounds as hazy and sludgy, and like this idea of like the air is thick with music, like extending this idea that opera is this weird, or like Blake woke up in this world where everything's operatic, and pushing it further so that all the air is also musical and every single item is musical. I feel like it somehow looks like that as well.
So it feels very coherent and that kind of thing. One quick one before we start and welcome a new guest. I just want to ask very quickly then, looking back over the journey of this opera, what has this creative partnership meant to each of you? So Matt, what is this, in terms of this process, I guess, this partnership in terms of you as an artist maybe?
I don't... we don't have a choice. But I don't really see a difference in... I'm personally really interested in culture, and I think it's really disappointing and a bit embarrassing that the various kind of worlds of culture still feel the need to relegate themselves to their different silos, because I think that the originality or novelty that we're maybe looking for from good art comes from when things clash into one another. And I mean, opera certainly used to be that. You know, it used to be Malevich and Picasso and Chagall and all of these people getting involved with it. But it's a rarer thing now for an artist to be maybe as involved as I have been in this. But for me, it feels great because it feels like an obvious place for making new art.
I think, is that the same for you, Oliver? Is it just, actually, it's this bringing together of everything in a way
bringing together of everything, I mean, it's the potential, the form, and also the whole time we were making this, we were thinking about making another thing as well. Yeah. As in, this was wrong for it, and there were ideas that were coming up, so we're going to do that for the next piece,
There we go. Thank you both for that. We're now going to dig into some of the staging in a little bit more detail. And so at this point, I would like to welcome co-director Anna Morrissey onto the stage. Welcome, Anna. Thank you for joining us. So we're going to talk a little bit about the direction side. Actually, Matt, we've been talking to you about being a librettist in this, and then we'll get into this kind of co-directing element. So you co-directed it together, you worked together on this. Matt, can you tell us a little bit about how Anna got involved on the project? You're obviously already working on it, and at what stage in the process, and perhaps even why that sort of collaboration was important to you, maybe especially on this project, or...
I have to remember. It was COVID, all of this stuff. I mean, that was actually a thing we didn't really mention here, which is kind of important.
We were locked away.
Right.
We were locked away while writing it, and maybe you can tell in the making of it. No, we were introduced, and Anna completely understood everything that we were trying to achieve from the writing and the music side of things immediately.
So Anna, I'll give you a bit of an introduction to Anna. Worked across theatre, you've well-established career as a director, movement of all kinds of productions as well. I mean, you work across genres, really. So what appealed to you then about Last Days? You're being, you know, what about this project? What appealed to you to get involved?
When I met them, they both made me laugh. I mean, they sort of, Ollie said, it's all on one note. Matt said there's no real story. I just thought it was quite a funny way to start a conversation. And genuinely, the things that they've talked about already tonight appealed to me as well, in the sense of the non-hierarchical nature of how forms within theatre making or opera making can exist, because that's not often true that you get to work like that. Often there is a hierarchy of either text or even the body of the performer is very much prioritized. But as we met and in our first conversation, I think there was some connection around doing things differently and genuinely trying to make something where a lighting gesture can be as important as something that is said, and that an object has the same status within the piece as the human body. So that really appealed to me, and I thought it sounded like a fun thing to get involved in.
And then you were on, and that was it. Then you're off, going forward. Oliver, I've got to ask, what does it feel like a little bit when you passed the baton over, if you like, or did you stay very heavily involved? I wondered what it was like to let go, really, of the score when it moves into the rehearsal room.
You didn't?
I didn't leave them alone. I went in every single day, which is not that normal for a composer, I think. But yeah, I went, well, also because I'm interested in the whole thing as well. And also I am always just in my basement, so it was nice to get out of the house. But I think we probably all had ideas about every single element that we're responsible for. And we were in constant dialogue about that. So it was never really left alone. Right. There were cuts and changes in every single version.
I think that was the strangest thing for me to learn as an outsider, is that traditionally there is a baton that is passed, that the genius librettist passes it to the genius composer, passes it to the genius director, which is absolute nonsense, obviously, because how would anything have much integrity from that process? And so I think there was an amazing fluidity as we all worked together, and I had slightly different hats here, where we changed music in the room, we changed words in the room, we changed staging and action based around these things, and we kept it as what I think it should be if you're creating something, which is an ever-evolving piece of of theatre.
So it was that kind of, the rehearsal process was sort of workshopping it as you went. You know, it's a real sort of trying stuff out, actually in, you know, a proper collaboration amongst all of you. Yeah, that's how you saw it.
So.
And you
I mean, all of us, as Ollie was saying, have our departments and our hats and our areas of expertise, but Ollie will give us a staging note or an idea, and equally we'll be listening to sound and you know, making suggestions about how it all works. I will say though, I think it wasn't so much like workshop. I mean, there was a very coherent libretto and score arrived. We weren't kind of completely ripping things apart. They were, you know, in what I would think of as a workshopping thing, but there was definitely a cross-collaborative conversation going through the process.
Yeah, that's a nice way of framing it. Multiple mentions of hats happening here. So, Matt, I wanted to ask what it was like for you in the role of librettist and co-director. Did it feel very natural? I think it sounds like, from what you're talking about, that the process, that it felt very natural to then be involved in the staging because you had a very clear vision. And you've talked about not only what it looks like, but what it feels like. And that seems quite central to this opera, is that right? It's about feel, as you know, and what's being conveyed in the atmosphere at any given moment.
Yeah, I think not to sound like silly, it's about everything, and everything is about everything. So death is everything, life and death is everything that we have, but so is milk, and so are guitar strings, and so are vine leaves, and all of these things, if you think about them. And I think that's what you're saying there as well, in terms of there were ideas in place. There were these like ideas and philosophies that we were going into the whole thing with. So yeah, it was always my intent to act like that. I mean, I'm an artist, so I don't really know any different on all of this. And I hadn't read a libretto before, but I'd read a lot of plays, and so mine, but by its very nature, if you've got a main character who doesn't speak, but they are firmly your main character, you're going to need a lot of stage direction in there, because them pouring the milk or playing with the guitar string or killing themselves, and them being put on an even playing field, are going to hold extreme amounts of weight. So those things were delineated and set out in kind of narrative terms, and they were thought about in terms of how they might feel, for sure, but also look.
Okay. In terms of working as co-directors, that's that side, can I ask how you work together and the creative dynamic between you? Anna, do you want to start?
I think we've got a really good working relationship. I mean, I think Matt has obviously has an authorship over it and has vision, artistic vision there. And I bring a lot of experience in terms of staging. I've worked in this building in terms of process and movement direction as well. I'm bringing a lot of that to it. And I think actually it's been incredibly easy and fluid in terms of being able to tag team certain roles within it and allow us to diverge and do different parts, but also be in the room together in a really easy way.
Yeah. I think we had such a good conversation, all of us, early on in terms of like what it was trying to achieve, that you're trying to achieve it in sometimes in very practical staging notes, and then sometimes in way more lofty kind of abstract terms. But yeah, it was a total joy.
You make this sound very ideal. I spent my life teaching about composers who've fallen out with their director and librettist, and then here you are. It all sounds very, it sounds great. It sounds great. Staging it for the first time, so is a big moment, right? And thinking about that. So can I ask really what it was like staging for the first time and balancing? You know, you've got different roles, but then we're dealing with singers, players. You've got an actor. How did that all work together? What was it like? Oliver, do you want to start off from your side?
I can talk about something that is pretty relevant to that. I wasn't that worried about the orchestra and all that stuff because I work with them all the time, and I had snuck in lots of sort of like semi-workshops with them at the beginning of their rehearsals for other things. Thank you to their other commissioners, you know.
Shall we say who they are?
Yeah, so 12 Ensemble and GBSR duo. And I had done a lot of work with them. I think we're going to show you some bits and pieces later, but I'm good shorthand with them, so I wasn't worried. I think that sometimes is a big clash when you're making an opera, is that suddenly as its probe, nothing works. But there was a sort of security in them, and also a generosity of their time towards the piece as well. Right. So actually, the usual stumbling block for me wasn't really there.
Yeah.
Apart from my music sounds absolutely. I mean, it might sound terrible to you anyway, but It sounds terrible as a stage and piano thing because it.
Yes, yeah, okay.
So I did have 6 weeks of listening to it at its worst version. Yeah.
Nice. So in terms of that staging then, that kind of first staging, what was it like for you doing it? Anna, do you want to start?
I mean, I do think we've had a really harmonious process throughout, and that's largely because I think the work is, the central work, the score, the libretto we're working from is really genuinely beautiful, and I think people buy into it from whatever position they're in, whether they're in the pit or on stage or supporting in technical teams. We have always tried to take care of everyone in the process. I mean, Ollie, he's not wrong, there is a lot of love. We do take care of each other. We try and check in every day and just see how we're all doing. And that's a really important part of the process. I think in opera, in my experience of making opera, there's a lot of people in the room. There's sometimes a lot of people behind desks, and you can become quite separated from each other as someone's behind a piano and maybe you haven't really looked at them and said hello. So we've always made a point of coming together at the beginning of a rehearsal day and just saying something very basic to each other, to say hello and, going into the process. And I think that has held, whether you're a singer or an actor, or whatever your role is, and with a lot of respect and dignity. And so, you've got to take care of actors who are coming into a world that they don't understand. And Matt and I have always been really cognizant of what that might mean, that they won't necessarily know a lot of the jargon or the terminology, or even just how the process works in opera and how different that is to either filmmaking or theatre, and what that to an actor means, and what they might be expecting and not expecting. So we've always tried to be really fully discharge all the information we have and take care of people and really hold them in a process that will keep things harmonious. And so I think it has been harmonious.
Yeah. And when you're working then with your singers and actors, are you learning from them as well and what they're bringing and all that kind of stuff? I mean, how do they shape, who you cast and who you had singing, and how did that shape the staging at all?
I think that for me, I'm more used to working with actors than singers for sure. But we did actually do some workshops, didn't we? Here.
There were clear front runners in auditions.
Yeah, well, because the easiest thing ever to audition for, because you say sing something and fall asleep while singing it.
Yep.
And basically, most people won't do that. And I think that was a really key idea to us, that they would slur their words into the fact they were saying jargon or that they were falling asleep. And I think that opera singers are like athletes. It's crazy what they can do with their body. And then it's crazy fun what you can make them do with their body when they can make these sounds. And of course that then had a big impact on the writing of it, and how the world might kind of turn into like a swamp of meaninglessness at certain points, or at least to the main character. But that was exciting.
Yeah.
So
and a willingness to do that as well.
Yeah. And finding
they are
people.
such champions. There's something strange about asking them to not sound so beautiful the whole time.
And also finding actors that were able to physically hold themselves in a role that's on stage for the whole time, and to kind of be able to let us find that interesting to some degree without psychologizing the character too much.
Yeah, so it's something that you were very conscious of. Once you'd made that decision about Blake being non-singing, it's then how does this fit, how does this work, and then that leads into casting and the staging, and that's kind of a constant thread of you working, is you have to sort of work around that, which must be different than if you had that role as a big singing role, which might be what is expected. So there's a kind of real decision there about what kind of opera it is almost by doing that, I think, even though that presumably felt right for the character and right for the...
I think we also just wanted to make something new.
Yeah.
Like that, I really care about that. I think it's important as a viewer. I simply want to be surprised when I see anything. And so I think it's really fun when you're making something for the first time, because you are the first audience. And especially when there's three of you, it's like, well, are we constantly surprising ourselves? Are we doing the kind of unexpected with integrity there?
Yeah, it's one of the interesting things when you go and see the opera is when the singing comes in. It's this kind of moment of, I'm at an opera, you know, it kind of is this kind of, there's a tension. I found that awfully fun, I have to say. I thought that was a big moment because you suddenly realise, you know, oh, we're here, and it shifts what it is, I think, a little bit there. I want to talk a little bit about the themes, Anna, and maybe speak to you about this. So heavy themes in this piece. Blake is someone struggling in lots of ways: identity, fame, substance use, and at his core, loneliness and a real despair. I mean, it kind of hangs over the piece. So what were the biggest challenges for you in terms of in things like in the rehearsal room and getting this story right, and whatever that might mean, and how do you support performers really in navigating this material?
Yeah, I don't think we really talked about story very much, to be totally honest. I think tone feels like a thing that we're hunting for more than necessarily story. But we've always taken it really seriously what the opera is about, and what it, you know, what that central character is going through, and then how that impacts performers who have to live through that on a nightly basis. So, I mean, the industry has got loads better at this. It's in quite an interesting place in terms of just taking care of emotional health. And this company, the Royal Opera House, is really quite good at it, I would say. I work across a few different companies who are now increasingly taking that seriously. And there is a lot of welfare support wraparound, which as directors, co-directors, we don't directly get involved in. You know, we're not therapists, and I don't cross into that world where I think I am. But they are offered that, should they wish to take it up. There's also just how, like I've touched on it already, how we run the room, which is that we run check-ins, we do check-outs, we take it really seriously. If people are, you know, we're just navigating something, we try and give space to it, and we honour that. But we also, it's a professional space where we're not kind of, like I say, offering them therapy. I think we just try to take care of each other in a really good way, and know that it is an affecting piece. I mean, the power of the piece is that it really leaves you in a feeling, and it's on the performers who take you through that and witness that, and it touches everyone's lives in different ways, some more profoundly than others. But the main thing is, I think we just are just quite, we just honour that in how we work with each other. And obviously through casting process and, you know, conversations with producers, we are, you know, we're teeing that up as well and saying, look, this is a serious piece. It does touch on these serious themes, and we just need to make sure we're taking care of ourselves. And
yeah, thank you. We're on the set, so I do want to mention the set before we welcome our next guest. So the set is by Grace Smart, is that correct? So we're on it. It's exciting to be on the set, to lead from here. So can you talk about some of the design choices? Did you have this kind of idea about what you wanted it in terms of set, costume and that kind of things, or did that evolve with Grace or whatever? Is that Matt, maybe? You can...
Yeah, I worked as the visual director of the whole thing, technically, and those ideas were there, like, right from the beginning.
There's a picture of the house at the beginning.
Yeah, I did a drawing that was this, basically.
Right.
So the backdrop I made is like, it's kind of inspired by this Victorian painter called John Martin, who was this really populist painter of the time, he was kind of like the Marvel Entertainment of the time, and he did massive, massive paintings. They have some in the Tate Britain. They did a show once of the apocalypse. And they used to light these things up with flames behind them, and there would be music performed and stories that were told, and it was kind of epic spectacle. And I really like this idea of this combination of interior and exterior, and a confusion between what was a psyche and what was not, because it's called Last Days, but when the groundskeeper comes on at the beginning, he appears to be talking about the last days of the world as well. And the confusion of how it might feel to Blake of the death of himself, but the death of the world as well. So I kind of wanted this epic backdrop there that would be lit up by flame, by light there, and that by the time we got to the end, that we kind of pushed through any sense of narrative or symbol, and we got to this really, really abstract place where it could just be sound and light, and the backdrop took over from that point. So yeah, these were kind of very clear ideas from early on. And the costumes, which have changed. The first time we did it was with Balenciaga, and we still have some of it, the green coat. I kind of wanted to find a way of talking about the iconic nature of the lead character without doing, because the whole thing's sort of like an anti-biopic. It's not trying to do an impersonation of Kurt Cobain. It's trying to talk about the symbol more. But there was this idea that he would wear something so over the top and ridiculous, which is very much like a celebrity in a supermarket. Don't look at me, but also look at me. And that green would be his color, and there wouldn't be green anywhere else but the backdrop. So these ideas, themes of color and all of this stuff, and speaking about how the ripped jeans in 2025 are now 2,000-pound ripped jeans, and how these kind of aesthetics got assimilated. So yeah, these were very much inbuilt to the whole thing.
Lovely. I think that's a fantastic way to round off the production side. Thank you very much for that, Matt. I think it would now be great to turn a little bit more focus to the music. And I'd like to introduce one of the two conductors who are working on the show for this run, Naomi Wu. Warm welcome, Naomi. Thank you for joining us. We'll start with a very general question. Were you a fan of Nirvana and Kurt Cobain when you were younger?
I mean, I think growing up in the late 90s, it was kind of impossible not to be. Of course I was. I ripped songs from Napster and put them on my mini disc player. Nevermind was like one of the mini disc. I didn't buy the CDs because I didn't have any money. I was a teenager, and so, but I remember very specifically on my very bad players listening to Nirvana as a teenager. Absolutely.
Grunge part of your life, taking you back. We should mention that Naomi made her conducting debut here at the Royal Opera House with yesterday's matinee of Last Days, so a big congratulations on that. And I want to know really, what have you enjoyed most about your experience working on this production coming into it?
Well, making a debut as a conductor can often be a very scary experiment. Scary experience. I often describe like meeting an orchestra, meeting an ensemble for the first time as like a first date, because you're there and you're sussing each other out and trying to figure out, whether it works. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And this is also the case with repertoire when you're coming to new music, and for reasons that might not have to do with the quality of the orchestra, the conductor, or the work, sometimes things are a good fit or they're not a good fit. This project was a very different kind of debut for me because of the piece I already knew very well, having worked on it also in 2022. So it was a real treat to have an element of novelty, of newness, working, of course, in this incredible building for the first time, but then also to be coming into a project that, as everyone said already, felt like family. Felt like a community where we know and love and care for one another. And so it had none of the trappings of fear and of uncertainty that a debut can sometimes have.
That is a glowing review there. Wonderful. I should mention a little bit actually of Naomi's background, I think, because you've had a really exciting couple of years. You're working with the National Youth Orchestra of Canada, the Orchestra Metropolitan. You're now assistant conductor at the Philadelphia Orchestra, among many other projects that I know you're involved in. So in terms of Oliver's music, then you already knew it and you knew his approach. So when he came to you, it was a sort of given, really. I've got all this other stuff on, but yes, of course, I'm going to be part of that. And in terms of the music, it felt very familiar in terms of what you're doing. Is that right?
Absolutely. And it's really, I always think of my work as collaboration. I'm not someone who creates work from scratch, typically. I'm an interpreter. But what I love about interpreting music is being in dialogue with other collaborators. And that's just as true if I'm conducting a Beethoven symphony, where I'm really in dialogue with that score, with the context, with the music, whether I can speak to the composer or not. But of course, when I can speak to the composer, and when I can collaborate also not only with directors, which is one of really my favorite things to do, but also with another conductor, which is an extremely rare treat. I find I'm more energized by my own ideas when they're bouncing off of other people. And it's really lucky, I should say, that Jack and I have now worked together for a number of years. It's very rare to have more than one conductor in the room. And we've all talked about the sort of unusual non-hierarchy of this project, you know, the non-hierarchy between different kinds of genres. But typically in an opera rehearsal room, for anyone who's been in one before, there is a hierarchy, and that hierarchy is very often the conductor, you know? And that's not a role, as much as I love my job and I love being a conductor, being the one person in charge is actually not something either that suits me especially well, but also that I feel is how I like to work, or how many people make their best work. I like to work in spaces where it feels like we're building something together. So having another conductor to share that role with made this happen very naturally. And it helped that Jack and I had shared the role of conducting once before, also on a piece of Oliver's earlier this year.
So we should mention that the run is being split with Jack Sheen, and he was involved, I think, in the first production as well. So there's a long history there in recording that we'll come to. And that previous piece you just mentioned is that Garland, I believe, which I thought this wonderful description of it as a large-scale choral and orchestral processional, which I thought was a wonderful description. So actually, you've all worked together already. With a horse, very famously with a horse. I think, Naomi, I was wondering then, so you've sort of touched on it a little bit, contemporary music then, and working on contemporary music, working with living composers, that is different for you, and it's a different experience, but one that you're enjoying.
You know, I actually don't find it that different.
Okay.
I mean, I feel like my work is to collaborate, and it's to collaborate with whoever is around. It's to collaborate with the scores, with the people, with the musicians on stage, and to communicate both across the stage with whoever I'm making music with, and to communicate also from the stage into the audience. I think that that's always happening, whether I'm working on music by historical or dead composers, or whether the composers are alive. I mean, I love working on works that are not just of today, like made today, but feel like they're about today, feel like they have relevance. But I think works from the far, far, far past can feel like they're extremely relevant, and works that are written today can feel deeply irrelevant, right? I mean, they can.
That is a lovely answer for the Opera House. That's a great answer for the Opera House. Come and see things on all the different stages. Like that very much. Oliver, can I ask you now, having Naomi join the opera, with a new, I mean, you've got two different conductors. They're each going to bring something different, right? Yeah. I presume. So, any new discoveries, interpretations, ways of thinking, actually, by having? What's that experience like for you, having two different people interpret your music?
It's just fun. There's one bit I won't say, and they do a slightly different tempo. I like both versions. So it's, no, I mean they both know it so well, and it felt strange for it to not be a split role this time as well. And they both bring completely different things to the table as well. But like, it's, yeah, as you say, we like work together on Garland, so there's a way that it works as well. I know that it's not the done thing, but I don't see why not. I mean, to me it makes so much sense. Rather than it being the usual assistant conductor, it's nice for there to be an equal investment in it, and to have two ideas about things as well. Yeah.
Very nice, thank you. If we're thinking, actually, I'm going to go to you, Matt and Anna now, about how some of the music and some of what Oliver has written, some of what Naomi has to make sure happens, in terms of things happening on stage that have to coincide with the music, and your libretto, you know, it's fed into that. How does all of that come together, this synthesis of music, text and direction, for you when you're working on it as directors?
Well, I think the score and the libretto that's inside that score is a really good guide to it. You know, there's a set there. There's something to start with, which is what the character says, and a sense of who they are and how they're interacting with Blake, who is our protagonist. And that is always a good place to start. And of course, the space is also giving you quite a lot. You know, you're rehearsing. In opera, we often have the luxury of rehearsing on a set, you know, and that was pretty true the first time round, and certainly true the second time round. So there's already quite a lot that is there, and then you just try stuff. You know, you just say, well, why don't you try coming in from here? Why don't you try? It's quite a natural thing for those things to begin to coincide, because you know, you will typically ask the conductor and the singers if they want to sing through once and in rehearsals, and they'll musically be pretty solid. And as directors, then you've got the room to play and say, well, why don't we try this version? Why don't we try that version? And by degrees, you end up with a scene that everyone's happy with, and the singers and actors are also feeding back into that.
I kept on joking that there weren't any scenes this time around, that there was one scene, because that's how it should feel. And whilst there's no such thing as no narrative, it's kind of inherently impossible, but there are some bits that have a little bit more of a sense of that, and some things that we purposely, both Ollie and I actually kind of kept really loose, like there's a party scene, it erupts, they're just going to shout these words, or they're going to fall asleep. So there was a lot more, there's a funny thing of like interpreting one's own self from that, but also like leaving things there. But also there were very carefully plotted ideas. Like I knew that the first time someone sung, it had to be funny. And like these things, so you like play into like a more comedic thing there, and certainly, you know, we really wanted this idea of like no diction from the singers and at certain stages. And so that's always a fun conversation with like Naomi and Jack, where, but not in a bad way, like they totally get why it's good. And yeah, and then I think also a sense of, I actually think that we're all quite aligned on an idea of just beauty. That, like, I think we really wanted to make something that was very beautiful. It is about, an intense subject, but but it's taking it from kind of quite odd angles on that. So I think there was a sense in the music, in the staging, and the directing, and all of these things of like, what is sort of like the boldest, most beautiful version of that?
I think that leads us very nicely on to asking Oliver a little bit more about your score and this kind of soundscape. I don't know what you prefer. You've hinted at some of the components. Can you tell us a little bit more about the components? Because you've sort of described it as almost Disney-like, and you mentioned Beauty and the Beast, the singing teapot and things like that. So how did you approach it? And I'd love to know how you would describe it, of what you've created here.
When I first met Matt, I said I wanted to write an opera about taking the bins out, and I have. And that's one of the main, and actually one of my favourite sounds. I will show you that sound. Well, the bottles in the bins, but it's stylistically pluralistic, the music, the scene with sort of mock Mormon music, which doesn't sound anything like that. Mormon music actually isn't very interesting, unfortunately. But I sort of like mine something called Sacred Harp, which is it's obviously very popular. It isn't some like niche thing I know about. But yeah, it sort of takes from everywhere. Like it really is. There aren't scenes, but actually, like musically, it is sort of quite episodic in that way. In a way that felt right for the house, and even like the idea of like lighting states and scenes, it just felt like it needed to be like that. Yeah, no, and I think that's one of the things. So it is, this feels as one, but actually you look at the score and it's an awful lot of scenes. I mean, yes,
an extraordinary number of scenes, but they're all attacker, so they all go straight on to the next one. So actually, as an audience member, sometimes there might be a pause and a rest, right? Yeah. But then other times it's like this is going straight on, and then it really sort of lives. So it's one of the distinctive things. You go, gosh, I've got 3 acts and however many scenes, and actually it just, but that's one of those kind of very conscious things. So musically, though, that does. We enter different worlds, and there's a sense of play actually about what you're doing there, of what can I do here, and you'll just bring it in terms of what you're doing. Is that how it felt like, of what can I do, what serves this? You felt quite free in terms of stylistically.
Yes, super. I never feel it just needs to move me, and until it does, then I don't put it in, or do something, which takes a while, actually.
One thing, we're going to hear in a little bit, but one thing I wanted to just ask you before I send you down to the pit is, there's a really distinctive thing, and I said it at the opening. I talked about a pre-recorded original aria, which is a very odd thing to say about an opera when you would expect, absolutely, there to be original arias. But can you tell us, because this is heard on a record, but it involves Caroline Polachek, that I know you've worked extensively with, Matt, is that right? Can you tell us a bit about creating that aria? It's in Italian, and its significance within the opera, because it's a really big moment in terms of what's happening there.
In that, we're imagining that Blake Blake's favourite music is opera, which is obviously insane. And that this is one moment where he's on his own. And I mean, opera does this all the time, where it sort of borrows the idea of opera within opera. And I quite fancied trying to write a sort of Verismo Puccini-esque thing. It's completely wrong, but it was fun to do. And I asked Caroline, this is so crass and horrible. I just asked her what the highest note she could sing was. And she sent me a WhatsApp voice note. And that just ended up being the note that I was aiming for. I mean, it really was quite that broad. But it's important. It's an important thing in the piece because we're sort of imagining that this is his favourite piece of music, and then there's a super fan that comes, and as if they know that person so well, they know their favourite song, even though you've seen that it's a private thing. They then sing back a version of the song a fifth lower because it's sort of impossible to actually sing it. But just, I mean, this idea of play within style is important. I mean, I managed to make like all these sort of big arias, Puccini, etc., and all these things, they always become like, there's a sort of a piano version or just an orchestral version of the arias. And I made one specifically with the goal that would end up on Classic FM, which has been one of my main sort of joke goals for my life. And my in class played it for a week on Classic FM. So yeah, so it's a sort of like fake storied aria from an opera that doesn't exist. Yeah.
I wrote it. I wrote the words on Google Translate.
Yes,
yes, it's all like Vita, right? It's all
Yes,
like,
yeah,
absolutely.
Very proud of it. I think that there was like an idea of doing it early on in this sort of knowing way, where it would be this pre-recorded thing sung by a pop star that would play with all of these different elements. And I don't think any of it was to be like clever or postmodern about it. It's actually just to be kind of truthful with that's like the way the world exists. And this world, of course, is the world of opera. So of course it made sense that it would be a classical opera aria that then this character would bend the sound of with their finger on stage and warp it there and like glitch it in a certain way. And that felt like a kind of profound take on what it is, which is like this character's attempting to have a sense of what we all want when we come and see something, which is like transcendence. And his answer is no, in the kind of like disgusting, mushy world of now that he lives in, he can't find that anymore.
I think you've whetted our appetites to hear some of this. So what I'm going to do is, Oliver and Naomi, I'm going to ask you to make your way into the pit. And I think we're going to get to hear a little bit there. Matt and Anna, if you can stay with me for the moment. So in terms of what we've got going on, as we've heard, Oliver Leith's score, it is this sound. I mean, it's given you a little sense. Like I say, we're going to hear some of it. We've got a lot of unconventional elements. You look at the instrument list at the start. It's quite exciting. Egg slicer. You don't see that every day. But we've got whistles. We've got bin bags. We've got bottles, which you're going to see in a second, and the pouring of cereal, which is quite a big feature. So blurring the boundaries really between music and sound, and this idea of what is familiar and what is not. But in this setting as well, so it asks a lot of you in that, as you kind of, and there's a lot of moments where it kind of blends in, so you hear one sound that you think you recognise, and then it becomes something else. It's a very sort of disorientating and disturbing in that way of the play, really, with what we might think of as timbre and things. So it's performed actually in the opera by 12 Ensemble, GBSR duo, and it bridges the mundane and the fantastical is what we've got. It is the players' night off, so we won't hear from them. We're not going to hear the full orchestration, but we are going to have a short demo of little bits from Naomi and Oliver, and they've worked to bring it to the. Are you ready, or do you want to? Are you ready? I mean, I can ask a question if you need me to. Are you ready? Oh, you're ready. There we go. I'm going to hand over to them then, and let's see what it sounds like.
Well, maybe we can start by talking about sort of the ways in which the sounds of the world that we imagine Blake in become these sort of musical tools that become pitched and expressed in different ways. So I'll start by just showing one of them, which is the bird sound that then ends up getting played. on the keyboard. So a sound that in fact welcomes the audience into the theater while the audience is walking in. There's ambient bird song that you might imagine is just diegetic sound coming from the world, and then it turns into sound played by the pianist that sounds something like this. So this is rhythmic bird sound at pitches that the pianist is playing alongside the conductor. Or another similar sound that again we might imagine comes from the world, the sound of the wolf. But then on the other hand, as Ollie and Matt and Anna have also talked about, there's the sounds that are not typically as musical, like the Beauty and the Beast, the objects coming to life. So maybe shall I pass it to you, Ollie, to talk a bit about the bins, the bottles?
Yeah. Feels quite disgraceful to be in George's pit. George is so good. I can't actually play any of these instruments, but I know sort of how they work. I'm just going to, this is a fun thing that George does, just I want to show you because it's insane. This is a mark tree, you know it for that sound. Now, of course, it's not going to stop. Oh, great, it does. But George actually plays this like as a keyboard, which is insanely skilled. So that's an A, G, A, B. Yeah, so this becomes like a tuned instrument, like everything. You know, it's sort of like going through a door, you know, that sort of weird sound. But anyway, that's one thing I just want to show you, just because it's cool. This is the cooler thing. I had these in, I'd written, this is the best thing about George Barton and Simon Reed actually, is that they will take everything you write super seriously and make a much better version. So I had these originally in sax, and then they would like jiggle them, but these are tuned. So this is a long note. Then George made them into like an actual keyboard instrument, making me like. Which is cool. And that's the bin moment, because the groundskeeper takes out a bin bag full of, you know, that sound of like bars emptying their bottle bins or whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
And when you first hear George make this sound from the pit, you've also just seen and heard the groundskeeper come on stage holding a bag of bottles. So you first hear the sort of ambient sound of bottles from one side of the room, and then these pitched bottles from the other side turning into something pitched. And the bottle sound also shows up in the keyboard too. Something like this. So this sound, Ollie, do you want to talk about how you made this bottle sound here?
It's a voice note, me blowing into a bottle made from about 16 years ago that I've used in every piece since. It's good. It's good because it's got worse and worse because I've transferred it from phone to phone. But yeah, that's that.
There's another bottle sound. I think what's so interesting about these sounds is that they are recognizably the sounds of blowing into bottles, and yet when they're transformed into this extremely pitched and harmonically congruous environment, you're not so aware of the origin of them. They sort of start in this place where you understand the referent, the object referent, and then turn into something that really transcends that. I mean, this is this sort of magic in the mundane and the banal and in the everyday. The other sound that we wanted to tell you about from the keyboard comes at a moment where Blake has been playing the guitar, and as he finishes playing the guitar, there's the sound of a buzz as his guitar, the sort of feedback sound, the static sound of a guitar buzz. we see that happen on stage. We hear that sound coming from the stage, this guitar static buzz. And then coming out of that, again, in the same vein, the keyboard begins playing the same sound, but now in a melodic pitched context. And at this point too, I'm not going to demonstrate it because I'm very poor at this, but at this point too, the entire orchestra also begins to whistle. And what I do love about conducting this and about the way I've experienced this also from the audience, because I'll say one of the joys about having two conductors is I get to sometimes not just stand on the podium, but also to sit in your seats and enjoy it. And one of the things I love is that these sounds often start by feeling very real and true to the world, but by the time these scenes finish, you've almost forgotten where the sounds came from. They've turned into something completely different, and something that, as Matt said, is just so beautiful and is really grounded in this search for beauty.
I was just thinking whether I should do something. Yeah, I'll give you a little Easter egg that I haven't told anyone about. There's a thing in the score. There's a whole joke in contemporary music about like stupid things being played with stupid things, and they usually make terrible sounds or whatever, but they're complicated and all that. And I actually, as a joke to George Barton, because I knew he'd see the score first, there's a moment in the piece where it says play a cymbal with a vibrator. And that is a direct contemporary music joke about how stupid we all are and how fussy and annoying. And I completely forgot to take it out. And then it sounded good, so it's in. It's not. It happens once because it was a joke, right? But it just sounds like that. So I can't do it. No, sorry. Look. That's for George. He can make the vibrator sound good. I can't. There we go. Read of that what you will. But that's my contemporary music joke.
With that, I think our demo is. I think it's a good place to end the demo.
Yeah.
To make your way back up so we can keep chatting to you, but thank you very much. I'm going to suggest that you weren't expecting it to go in that direction when you were going to get a little bit of this opera. So but I mean, one of the things actually in Ollie's score, when you look at it, and actually the performers have found it, lots of the references are, it sounds like this, it's supposed to have this effect. You get a real sense of charting across the opera, I think, of you might hear a sound in one context, a doorbell, and then it comes back in a different context in the orchestra. And all of that kind of sort of melding together, I think, is really distinctive. And actually, what comes across in the score is that Ollie's, you have a very it's a lot of like, I want this sound, I know the sound I want, and how do I make these fabulous musicians, 12 ensemble and GPSR, do it? I think is a lot of that detail in the string writing and stuff really stands out from that, yeah. So that's clearly a bit of a fascination. In terms of, we're going to come to our final segment now, which is we're sort of thinking, I would like to think a little bit about the journey of this opera, because it was in London in 2022, it's been to LA, it's been to Disney Hall, it's now on a recording, film project, aware of that. Could you ever have imagined this trajectory from this opera when you started? Matt, do you want to?
You know what I'm going to say. Yes. Yes, because the fun thing about working with people who are very good is that you kind of G yourself up and you get very ambitious about it. I mean, but why would you make an opera if you weren't trying to be ambitious? So, yeah, we always intended for this to hit as hard as it could.
Yeah, we diary 2025.
Yeah,
the Bible.
But we also wanted to make something that people we knew who weren't in on jokes about vibrators and experimental music would want to see and would engage with in a certain way. So yeah, no, it was always the intent that this thing would continue on. Of course, you hope it's successful, so you invited to do 16 nights here, but certainly adapting it once again into a film was always an idea I had right away.
Right. I mean, it is extraordinary, really. I mean, contemporary opera, you know, actually to get a revival is a big thing, and to get a revival at the Opera House and things like that. I mean, there's a lot of support, actually, which is really fantastic. I'm interested, actually, in the score being recorded, so we'll come to the film in a second. But this is the point at which you are sort of fixing the score a little bit. It's a particular thing. Once you record it, it's like, this is what it is. This is what this music is. This is what the score is. And there's a certain idea of it being sort of definitive in that way, particularly with contemporary music, right? What the recording becomes in that context. So I wondered what really that was like for you and that process. And was that difficult to kind of, in terms of control of wanting to, you know, have it so perfect, and you know, whereas in performance it's a very different thing, right?
It's a very good question. No, I actually think of recordings actually just as a performance or something, and I'm really not that anal about going over them. I can be, but I rely on producers to be more like that. For me, it's not. Recordings for me don't have to be a text version of the thing. I know that is the case for other people, but I mean, for example, there is another recording of the score, which was made for the film, and it is really different in quite a few ways. So I'm happy for it to be like a living thing. Yeah, it is a stamped version. Yeah. But, I mean, it was just fun to make it. Yeah.
And work with that team again. Yeah.
Work with the team. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll come to the end now. We've got to draw to a close a little bit. I think there's a sort of question here about the success of a project like this, and can we open it out, and does it mean anything for contemporary opera, contemporary music broadly, and where do you want to see the art form going, and is there anything to be learned from this project, really? I mean, Matt, you've got interesting things about your coming into opera and how you feel about it. Where do you see this project in terms of that world?
Where do I see this project going?
Yeah, well, in terms of, does it mean anything for contemporary music and contemporary opera?
Not for me to answer. Right. I'd hope so. I mean, all you want to do is put something out there that can change the world. That's literally the aim of art, is to do that in the most small or big way possible. But I don't know, I don't really care as well. Like, I care about us, what we want to do with it next, really, and what we learned from it. And I think we have things that we've taken from making this that we want to expand upon for future things.
Yeah. In terms of what audience take away, can I very quickly, as our kind of last thing, just go down the row a little bit, or is that, Debbie's looking terrified. In terms of what would you like audiences to take away from this?
At the start. I mean, Matt said change the world. Yes, I think art changes the world, but I also think it just makes us feel things in a really big way. And I think this is a piece that every time I experience it, whether from the podium or in the rehearsal room or in the audience, I experience very big feelings. And I really hope that audiences share in those.
I'm going to have to say exactly the same thing, and I did think that before you said it out loud. But be left in a feeling, like to have a profound connection and feeling with something. I don't think it's about anything in that sense, or you're going to necessarily like change opinions on things. I don't think it's that kind of piece. But it is, and I do know from watching it myself that I have a really profound feelings watching it, and friends and peers of mine that come to see it as well. I think being left in a feeling, and hopefully feeling like they've seen something new and different. Yeah.
Matt?
I don't really think about what I want people to, what an audience on that level, other than like the aim is to communicate something incommunicable. And I think that's what you're saying, which is like some kind of feeling, but that feeling to be as complex a one as possible.
Oliver, lastly, quickly, same?
Yeah, I mean, all the same stuff, but also, I mean, more I've been thinking about recently, just also hope that, I don't usually think about these things, but that the other composers and things might actually be an artist be serious about ambition and the scope and things you can pull out of things if you like work quite hard and are really like serious about them. I think that yeah, as we said earlier, don't silo yourself or whatever, you know, work with lots of people. And like, I hope that also feels like a thing with the energy of the opera, as well as the obvious, like, obviously feel something, yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you. I am afraid that is all we've got time for this evening, but you can buy tickets to see Last Days until the 3rd of January. It's here at the Opera House. Many thanks to all my guests this evening. Thanks to all of you here in the Limbury tonight, as well as all of those around the world watching. We hope you've enjoyed this insight, supported by Rolex. Good night.